So we are in the new town, which is a bit of a weird name because it's not a town and it's certainly not new. It was only new in 1348 when it was founded by our old friend Chuck, the dude with 4 wives. It is the centre, so this is Wenceslas Square. It's the centre of Newtown and it's named after Saint Wenceslas, which is the major patron saint of the Czech Republic. And if you look up at the top of the square, you can see him there, old Wenceslas, sitting on a horse. Can you see him? Really? He's in front of the museum. I promise you. Just believe me. Yeah, so that's Saint Wenceslas. And Saint Wenceslas is the same Wenceslas as in the English or English-speaking world Christmas carol, Good King Wenceslas. But I'm afraid I have to disappoint you because he was never a king. He was only a duke. However, that's still pretty good. I mean, it would have been worse if he was a senior accountant or professor of tax law or something like that. That would have been boring. Yes, has it always been called St. Wenceslas Square? It was only called that in 1848. Do you remember what happened in 1848? Nationalist Revolution. So before that, it had the far less glorious name of Horse Market. And they've still got the McDonald's on this square in remembrance. So this is actually more of a boulevard than a square. It's 750 meters long, and at the top you've got the National Museum, that big building. Now, to be honest with you, it's probably one of those museums where the exterior is more interesting than the actual exhibition. Unless you're really into dead stuffed animals and old rocks. And if you are, you're sick. Now, 2 of the highlights are, for example, a smelly mammoth's head and a whale skeleton. And no, they're not for sale as souvenirs, in case you were thinking about that. Hey, Grandma, look what I brought back from Prague. It's a smelly mammoth's head. Smells of old beer. Not possible. Right in front of the museum, you have a memorial to a guy called Jan Palach. Now, he was a student, and on the 16th of January 1969, he came out here in front of the museum. He doused himself with petrol and set fire to himself. Now, why did he do that? Was he a bit bored with his studies? Was it a bit chilly in January? Maybe you Australians, you can understand the way he felt. No. To understand why, we need to go back in time a couple of months to 1968 and the Prague Spring and the crushing of the Prague Spring. Now, to start with, you need to understand that life here during communism was really tough. There was no freedom of speech for normal people, the media was heavily censored, and the movement was extremely restricted. Until August 1968, there was a reformer politician that came to power here. His name was Dubček, and he wanted to change the way things were done here. He wanted people to be able to say whatever they wanted to. He wanted people he wanted the media to be able to write whatever they wanted to, and he wanted people to be able to go on cheap package holidays to the south of Spain if they wanted to. But the guys in Moscow, the Soviets, they didn't like this one bit, because they were thinking, if things get out of hand here in Czechoslovakia, it might spread to other eastern countries, and soon we'll end up with democracy everywhere. And what kind of world would that be? Yeah. A right madhouse, and we can't have that. So they decided to pay a little visit to Prague with an army of 200,000 men, 2,000 tanks, and 800 airplanes, and 300,000 picnic baskets with pickled gherkins, sandwiches, and vodka. Now, their plan was to invade the country at midnight for 2 reasons. Now, the first one was, and it sounds badass, we invade at midnight. And number 2, that all the radios would be off air, so they wouldn't be able to warn the Czechs. However, perhaps having started nibbling a bit too early at the vodka in their picnic baskets, the Soviets committed a crucial mistake. Because Soviet at this time was following daylight saving time. And Czechoslovakia wasn't. No! So they sent out the orders at 11 o'clock, and the radios were able to warn the Czechs. However, the Czechs realized that there wasn't really any point in making violent resistance against a huge army. So instead they opted for non-violent resistance. And soon people are waking each other up from their beds, people are taking to the streets, they start pulling down street signs, they start pulling down road signs, or putting up new road signs pointing back to Moscow. Moscow, 1,664 kilometers that way. Just a little hint for you. Now Czech railway personnel, they kept Soviet army supplies going around in circles for days. And more importantly, many Czech villages, they changed names to Dubček after the reformer politician to confuse the Soviets. So when the Soviets went and pulled out there in their tanks, they opened up and they asked, "Hello, where are we?" Then the Czechs would go, "You're in Dubček." And the Soviets would go, "In Dubček? But we were there half an hour ago." Or imagine being on a train. "This is Dubček. Please, all passengers for Dubček, get off here. Next stop, Dubček." So soon, without sat-nav or without Google Maps, the Soviets were hopelessly lost. And the Czechs, they managed to delay the invasion for several days. However, in the end, of course, the Soviets were able to take over the country, take over Prague. There were pockets of violent resistance. All in all, 72 Czechs and Slovaks died. And there are still bullet holes left in the facade of the National Museum up there because there was battle. There were people battling there. So in the aftermath of this, in the aftermath of all this hullabaloo, of course, people, they felt that there was no hope anymore. There was no light at the end of the tunnel. All criticism was silenced. And that is why Jan Palach, the student, why he decided to do the ultimate protest and come out here in front of the museum and set himself on fire. Now on the anniversary of his death, every year people, they come here and they leave flowers, which is very touching. But some people also light candles, which might be a little inappropriate. I don't know, I'll leave it up to you. And now we'll return just for a short mention of those buildings over there.